Uh,
You have a very cool surname
Thank you.
because of the chocolate.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you love Kit Kat, by the way? From time to time.
Yes,
Okay.
of course, but you know.
The mics are on.
Okay.
Yes, can you hear us? Yeah, all good?
Dragi gledatelji, evo pozdravljam vas iz BKC-a direktno sa gostima koji su danas bili spikeri na TEDxu. To su bila prva dva gosta, Lazar Džamić i Paul Kitkat. Njih danas pozdravljamo ovdje na našem staple žutom kauču. Tako da ćemo u suštini, ideja iz ovog podcasta danas jeste da prenesemo glavne ideje i poruke koje su nekako podijeljene u sklopu TEDx Talksa vama gledateljima koji danas niste bili u mogućnosti da prisustvujete live talksima. Tako da evo, Paul Kitkat and Lazar Džamić, welcome. It's great having you. I've been in the audience during your speech. It has been very, very great to listen to you.
Thank you.
Basically, I would just like us to sum up the main messages and main ideas behind your talk and speech, which was briefly, in my understanding, basically the negative sides of irresponsible advertising and overconsumption that is basically happening in the 21st century, overconsumption that can be generalized, that goes from overconsumption of digital marketing, of food, of shopping, of everything that is kind of offered today on the market. So briefly, let's just go to the main points and let's see how do you see the main reasons behind that overconsumption today, and what is for you, in your understanding, responsible advertising and responsible marketing?
So there's lots of questions
yes.
in that question. So let's start with we have been living for the last few decades, probably 5 or 6 decades, in a sort of a fantasy. And that fantasy story was always kind of full of sunshine and happy people, where any problem in life could be resolved with one very simple action, buying something. And we were doing that, and we bought that story like all the growth, and in that land everything grows. The economy grows, and companies grow, and personal happiness grows, and all the resources around us, food and drink and air and water and everything else, grows as well, because we always assumed it's completely limitless. And we know that's not the case. So the problem is that because we bought into that fantasy, we have in the last 50 years or so started damaging our world really, really badly. And when you look at the climate change, climate catastrophe, if you look at all the biodiversity degradation, if you look at how our lifestyles are degrading, we are poisoning ourselves mentally and physically. Basically, it's because we bought into that story. And that story is supported by a big industry that is sort of making us think and feel like this is a good thing. And all of those things are because somebody's going to make a profit out of it. So Paul and I worked in the so-called marketing and advertising industry for many, many years, and we realized what the story is all about. We realized that the story is bad, and that our industry, the marketing industry, the advertising industry, really needs to start, finally, for the first time, to start thinking and talking about the impact that the industry is making on the world and what the industry can do something about it. That was the gist of the talk.
The gist.
Yeah.
So in that context, would you say that it's a shared responsibility between the consumers and the advertisers, or is it largely just on the advertisers?
I think it's I think it's a bit of a red herring to say that we are all equally responsible. We are not.
No.
Because we as consumers simply do not have the same decision power that the big companies and organizations have. We have impulses, we've got our emotions, and we are very often not even aware of what we do.
Exactly.
And people like us, what we used to be, do understand that really well, and they understand the emotional and the psychological mechanisms of how our brains and minds work, and they know what buttons to press in order to kind of keep us buying. So it's not an equal fight, you know. So the responsibility, in our mind at least, more responsibility lies on the side of companies and industry than on the side of consumers.
Especially when we take into consideration that a large audience is also people who are not 18, people who cannot decide for themselves, who don't have critical thinking in that sense as we grown-ups have. So especially because of those big marketing and advertising companies use specific psychological strategies, and we're in a way also manipulated in a very, maybe it's a harsh word, but we are in a way. So definitely it's to be considered the responsibility of the advertisers.
There's no doubt about it.
Okay, so Paul, you are a creative director. How do you see this topic and this issue? And would you say that generally the advertising issue, the irresponsible advertising issue, lies more on the advertisers or the producers? So the one that are producing the product or the one who are advertising it? Who is more responsible?
Okay.
So this is another set of questions now.
Sure. Well, it's shared. I mean, as a creative director in an advertising business, my job was to find the ways to persuade people to change their behavior. And we were very careful, in fact, about the clients that we worked with. We chose clients who we believed were credible and who had integrity and were doing things that were not damaging as far as possible. I'm not going to say that all our clients fell into that category because that wouldn't be true, but as far as possible that's what we aim to do. And the reason is simple, because your question is fine. There are many, many brands whose products are fine, are good. They're leading the way. One of ours, we've worked with a supermarket in England who are pioneers in sustainability and fair pricing to their suppliers. They insisted that we use biodegradable inks and recycled paper and all of those things with our communications. So they're the good guys, but there are many, many clients who are not like that, clearly. And those guys, those brands have responsibility for what they have done to the planet. And their advertising agencies have paid enormous amounts of money to persuade people to consume their products. Now, if we think about what's happened with tobacco advertising, right? So
that's a huge switch.
Yeah,
And
for
a good
many,
example.
many years,
Advertising
advertising agencies took masses of money from tobacco companies. The tobacco companies knew the damage that they were doing to people's health. The advertising agencies knew also the damage that was being done. And nobody cared. They just wanted to continue to make money. And there came a turning point, and the turning point was in our career lifetimes, as it were, where suddenly people in advertising started saying, hang on, no, we're not going to do that anymore. And that's the model. So what we're saying now is so tobacco, that subject is really closed in developed countries. We all know you should not be promoting tobacco.
Yeah.
But what else shouldn't you be promoting? Well, endless consumption, wastage of resources,
Exactly.
fossil fuels,
Sugar.
those things. Yes, those things now need to come into the same category as tobacco. So ad agencies say, no, we're not doing that.
Yeah, substances that are causing addictions, actually. I mean, sugar is definitely one of them.
An addiction to retail and to consumption, which lies at the heart of the neoliberal capitalist economy. And that's really what we're challenging.
In your humble opinion, what's the role of the government there? Like, should they be making some laws that are going to tackle the ethical issue of irresponsible advertising?
Yes, of course there's a place for governments. I mean, so in the example I gave you with tobacco, we worked with the Department of Health in England on campaigns to stop people smoking. But the thing that really made a big difference in England, in Britain, was when it was made illegal to smoke indoors.
Yep.
And so although we were very persuasive and we could show success, once the government said, okay, no more smoking indoors, no more smoking in pubs, no more smoking in restaurants, smoking then declined.
Went down.
Yeah, you have to have the government on your side. But to do that, you need a government that actually cares and is more interested in the population's
Then in the
well-being
economics.
than in the economy.
That's a very, very good point.
Very, very good point.
Because I believe that the role of government is absolutely critical. Because, as Paul said, the biggest difference you can make the fastest through regulation. Everything else is much, much slower process. And it's also not an equal fight because the forces of denial and delay always have more money. So in that sense, it's not an equal fight. But the governments are absolutely critical, and it really pains me. It saddens me how much the governments are absent from many of these issues, all under the excuse of let's maintain the economy. But it's like the economy is that ideal thing that sits on at the top, and it doesn't affect us in bad ways as well. We do have recipes, we do have ideas for different kinds of economy, but we are, I believe, still far away from it.
Yes, so this is in a way also the issue of us as citizens of the world to take responsibility and to tackle that issue, because government will always, I mean, in most of the countries, value more the economics than
consumers than citizens.
Yes.
Are other tools that could be used in this fight, besides raising awareness, besides active governments, besides responsible advertising? Is there something else that, of course, these kind of talks, these kind of podcasts are raising awareness, but what else can be done? What else can be...
Well, it is actually...
We need a revolution, basically. Yeah.
Well, what you have to do is change the conceptual framework in people's minds. So...
And that's the hardest to be done.
Yes, but if you think of, so take oil, for example. If you're an oil company, you can go to a government, for example in Britain, and say we wish to continue to drill for oil, and they will grant you a license to do that, even now.
Yeah.
If you're Greenpeace and you're opposing that, you will be positioned in the conceptual framework as annoying protesters who should be sent to jail, who get in our way, who stop us from living the lives we want to live. And the truth, of course, is the opposite. The people who are going to destroy our lives are the oil companies, and the people who are going to make our lives better are the protesters. So you have to shift the conceptual framework, and to do that, you need the power of persuasion that we deploy in advertising, because it's a conceptual change in people's minds. And we're pushing not just against the big brands and the big money, but of course the media as well, which is hugely invested in supporting oil, fossil fuel, all those things, and positioning protest as annoying, irritating, squeaky little people who need to be shut up. And that's, so if you deploy the kind of powers of persuasion that we have in those people's favour, eventually you can bring them up to the level where their voices are heard equally or even more loudly, and that's where we need to get to.
But also, specifically for the marketing industry or the advertising as part of the marketing industry, it's just to start talking about it for the first time.
Yes.
Because actually the industry, because industry is not talking about it at all. Absolutely, that issue does not exist. It's like that industry is not part of the world.
It's like everyone knows about it, it's like now but no one is
But
really...
people just don't even think about it. It's like we are not responsible for any actions whatsoever. It's just somebody comes with a bag of cash, you do a campaign, and that's it. So there's nothing else that we think about. And our actions are actually having consequences in the real world. We are filling in that shopping trolley that is taking us all to hell. But the industry is not talking about it. So Paul and I are trying to initiate that debate, that just start talking about it for the first time ever, to start talking about it and say, okay, we are responsible for some of those things, let's see what we can do.
It's a huge step for humankind. I mean, it really is.
At least for advertising.
Yes. One more question. I have to get back in a way to responsibility. So we talked about climate change being one of the consequences, one of the catastrophic consequences of irresponsible advertising, irresponsible overconsumption, and so on. In your opinion, who is more responsible, the consumer that is not recycling, or the producer that is using plastic bags for
The producer.
producing?
The producer.
The producer, no doubt.
As a consumer, you have very little power.
Yeah.
You can't. I mean, you have some power to make changes. You can switch brands. You can use a bag for life. But those are very small changes. They're very important, but they're not going to make the biggest difference. It's only when the producer changes their behaviour, and that will be in response to consumer activity for sure, but it's also in response to a change in opinion. And that's why I go back to the thing about tobacco. It's a very good example of the advertising industry changing its mind and then changing the direction of public debate. And we need the same thing to happen here. So you're, as an individual, sure, make all those changes, do all those things, but the producers have to be the focus because they're the ones making money from this, right? That's where the money is. Follow the money.
Can you just briefly sum up what have you within your organization done so far regarding this issue? Because you have an organization that is related to ecological, let's say, raising eco-awareness. So what would you kind of...
So we've launched a blog, a site called probonomundi.org that actually is talking about this. So we are, as far as we know, the first two people from the industry with distinguished careers in the industry that actually started talking about this. So on that blog, on that website, we are actually literally talking about exactly the same things. So that's kind of the first move. The second move is we are trying to practice what we preach. You're trying to help the guys who are trying to do something good. So last year I was still living in Serbia. I helped the Red Cross in Serbia produce a massive campaign about CPR, which is actually resuscitation, basically, to inspire people to start thinking about it, using lots of sports people to break through the awareness and actually start creating the awareness about that. Actually, a very important issue for Red Cross at the moment. There was a massive campaign, got lots of publicity, and I was doing it for free. I'm working with various NGOs, teaching them how to tell the story for free as well. So in that sense, trying to do what we preach, give pro bono some of our expertise, some of our skills to the guys who are trying to do something good.
So definitely storytelling is a very powerful tool regarding this issue and similar others.
Absolutely, yeah.
Awesome.
And I'm working, I am a freelance creative consultant now. My main client that I work with at the moment is in the field of education, because I think it's very clear that children in school growing up need to be aware of these issues and need to participate in this discussion. Because they will come into the market as consumers themselves, but I would ideally they should come into the market knowing exactly their importance in the scheme of things and making good choices. And when they go into the world of work, working for people who are doing things that will actually save the planet. I mean, it's not overstating the case to say here we're trying to save the planet. That is literally what we're trying to do.
And it's time. I mean, everyone was laughing at Greta, but I mean, because she has her own ways which are very intensive and which are very, but the case is that the planet is suffering, that we're living in horrible times and that something needs to be done.
But I have to actually reframe the language. I really don't think that the planet is suffering. We are suffering.
Well,
the planet is going to be fine. The planet has been through many worse things in the history of the planet. We are not going to be fine. It's not about the planet, it's about us and our ways of thinking. So if you want to protect us, we need to kind of change the way we behave.
And everyone is talking like we need to leave this world in a better condition because of our grandchildren. What about us? I mean,
that's it.
Currently, the current
exactly
well, yes, and that goes back to what you were talking about, cognitive pollution. You know, as long as we live in this surreal world where buying more things is going to make us happy, this is just not true. And there is no way that you can consume your way to happiness.
Yeah.
And that's a very serious problem.
I don't know if you have been following Gabor Mate. He's a very prominent psychologist, and he's talking actually about addiction and trauma and the relation of addiction and trauma and how overconsumption is actually just spinning that evil circle where you cannot break it free without some professional help. So
Yeah.
definitely we're cognitively polluted and polluted in every other way. So
Well, that's at the heart of everything. If you try to address the cognitive pollution, we can address all the other pollutions as well.
exactly.
Yes.
It starts from within, all the changes.
Absolutely right.
Amazing. Thanks a lot, Paul and Lazar.
It's
I'm
my
wishing
pleasure.
you a great
It's our
day
pleasure.
and a great day in Sarajevo.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Evo ga, ako reći kraj prvog poluvremena, kraj prvog bloka, nastavljamo se društvo malo kasnije sa još zanimljivim TEDx speakerima. Vidimo se.